So today we have another Square Enix cast interview, this one with Suzie Yeung, who is the voice of Yuffie Kisaragi, and how she's adding so many new layers to Yuffie and how Yuffie has grown from Intermission when we first got introduced to her, all the way to Rebirth. So if any of that sounds cool to you, feel free to click the like button, and if you're new here and you'd like to stick around and help out the channel, you can subscribe and leave a comment. It is always appreciated. So my first introduction to Suzie was actually through Final Fantasy VII Intergrade in its Intermission DLC. I think a lot of people were introduced to Suzie that way, and her story is really interesting because she talks about working a really crappy 9-to-5 job and taking a chance on moving to LA to pursue voice acting. And if I'm not mistaken, her first audition she got was for Yuffie, and she landed it, which is pretty incredible. That's a very impressive thing to do, and I think she's doing a really great job at adding so many layers to Yuffie because she's this really obnoxious kid at times, but she's also really got some downbeat moments where things can get serious. So the first question they ask Suzie is, in her own words, who is Yuffie? Suzie responds by saying Yuffie is a huge goober. She has such grandiose visions of herself and the world around her. She's this kid who has such wide open, sparkly eyes. She looks at the world and is like, this is so much, and there's so much to do. Except for Midgar, which she actively trashes on. She has a mission to restore the former glory of Wutai, and she will do anything in her power to do that, and have lots of fun along the way. I think her description of Yuffie is bang on. Yuffie really is just a goober, and again, she's a teenager. She's gonna be really obnoxious and loud and rambunctious at time, and she does kind of have this one-track mind of materia, materia, materia. And it's not just, I want to get materia just to get materia. There's a greater purpose to Yuffie when it comes to her obsession with materia, because if she can get her hands on enough, maybe she can protect her home, which is a really beautiful thing. But as you learn more about Yuffie, not just in the Intermission DLC, but through Rebirth, you realize she's been through so much. And I can't wait to see what they do in part 3 when we inevitably get to actually visit Wutai and see her relationship with her family and how strained it is, because it's a conflict for her because she cares about Wutai, but she's got that conflict with her family. But then there's what Shinra did to her and what Shinra took from her, specifically Scarlet. So she does a really great job of those layers, like everyone in the cast does, and a lot of that is the writing as well. They're doing a bang-up job. Up next is, how did she feel about the positive reception that people had to Yuffie from the Intermission DLC? She responds by saying, I was really stunned by all the positive reactions from everyone. I've seen some comments online where they were really excited by the interpretation of Yuffie, because prior to that, she wasn't super developed. The episode Intermission DLC was the first time we got to see much more of her character, and I'm grateful that people were happy with my rendition of it. To see them say things like, she's just like when I imagined the game back in '97. I was very excited to see that. I also agree. Again, the previous voice actor for Yuffie was Christy Carlson Romano, who a lot of you might know, if you're a millennial like me who grew up watching Even Stevens on Disney Channel. That was the original voice actor. And I thought she did a really great job, but her version of Yuffie that was written for her specifically, in Advent Children was, again, kind of very one note. Materia hunter, very loud, very obnoxious. That's not a knock on Christy at all. That's just how the character was written. There wasn't really much room to develop that character. And for Yuffie specifically to get that DLC to really flesh the character out, and I think it was very much necessary, because it doesn't just flesh out Yuffie, it fleshes out the entire story and world of Final Fantasy VII moving into Rebirth. And she's exactly how I remember her from, the original game, being this really kind of nerdy kid doing the punching of the air, making the sounds, which is really silly. And she has these really great moments with the cast, specifically with Barrett, who it's kind of like this older brother, little sister kind of relationship that they have, where she clearly admires him, but they're gonna butt heads from time to time. And it's just really well done, seeing her version of Yuffie be so reminiscent of what we got in the OG game. And she's also someone who streams. She streamed this game on Twitch plenty of times and was able to interact with chat and just see the positive reaction, which is really beautiful. Again, there's a lot of negativity out there, but to see the cast see so much love for this game and their versions of the characters and portrayals is really nice to see, and it's just really refreshing. Up next, they ask Suzie, how has Yuffie changed from Intermission to Rebirth? Suzie responds by saying the core of Yuffie pretty much stays the same, but she definitely carries a weight to her since Intermission because of all the events that happened. She doesn't necessarily let it show at first when she interacts with everybody, but she's still very much focused on her goals. Now she has a definite mission, whereas before it was a lot of fun and games. It still is for Rebirth, but there's a serious side we get get to explore later on in the game. Her coming to terms with what happened. It'll be an emotional scene, I think. And that's how Yuffie is introduced. She is this really young, carefree kind of teenager who's got a mission. She's very skilled, obviously, as a fighter in her ninjutsu, but she's kind of, very lighthearted about everything. She's not taking it super seriously. But in that Intermission DLC, as she starts to work more with Sonon and they get into some really deep stuff with Deep Ground and Nero, spoilers ahead for those who didn't play Intermission, but she faces a pretty tough battle with Scarlet, and she comes face to face with her, and she realizes that Scarlet was technically the reason why things went down the way they did in Wutai. And then later on in that story, she loses Sonon to Nero as he's protecting her, and Sonon is very much this older brother kind of figure who very quickly takes care of Yuffie and realizes that, yeah, she's young, maybe inexperienced, but she's got a bigger role to play. And that experience of losing Sonon absolutely changes her, and she still kind of keeps that guard up of being that young, rambunctious kid, but deep down there's a lot of hurt that she's going through. And there's this really beautiful scene when you get to Corel and Barrett is just treated like absolute garbage because of what went down between the town and Shinra and the reactor and losing so many people. And the people of Corel go up to Barrett and they're just so disrespectful. And at this point in the story, Yuffie obviously has, a lot of affection for Barrett and Tifa because they're Avalanche, and that's the section of Avalanche that she really wanted to join. But she does butt heads with Barrett, and she kind of views him as like this mean older guy. But when you get to that scene in Corel and everyone's trashing Barrett, the first person to come to his defense is Yuffie, and she's telling these people to stop. Why are you treating him this way? So that's a really beautiful character moment of her really showing just how vulnerable she can be and how much she really does care about them. And when you get towards the end of that section, Barrett reveals to everybody what happened and how Scarlet was technically responsible not only for him losing his arm, but also the alleged death of Dyne at that point. And that's an anchor point for both Yuffie and Barrett because they both had something taken away from them or destroyed, not just because of Shinra, but because of Scarlet in particular. So that's a really great bonding moment between the two of them. And there's other sequences in the game where she continues to open up to people and cracks jokes and gets really, cozy with Red 13 and treats him like a dog, and he's totally fine with it as she just kind of scratches his head and whatnot. Up next, they ask Suzie about the most challenging aspect of playing Yuffie. She responds by saying Yuffie is a very reactive character. Everything about her is very big, in contrast to the existing team who I think are relatively serious and a lot more grounded. So it was kind of challenging to balance that, to make her into something that's not a caricature, or something that will stick out like a sore thumb. We don't always get visuals or really know how she's going to react, so it was all about towing that balance between expressive and contained. We had to play around a lot to find that perfect balance where she's not too goofy. And again, as I explained before, they do a really great job of finding that balance where she's kind of pushing the line a little bit and being so annoying, but then she can turn around and just be very charming and really silly with everybody. And she's got some moments where she even develops herself. There's a really funny side quest that you do with Kyrie where she's just being an obnoxious a-hole. Kyrie is. And Yuffie kind of comes to her defense because they're both young kids who understand what it's like to have that weight and pressure that their parents are putting on them. So they have that connective moment. And Yuffie kind of has that realization of what her role is in, the group and stopping Shinra and Sephiroth and, protecting the planet. So there's a lot of really great character work, and Suzie has done such a great job of nuancing that character with her performance as well. Up next, they ask Suzie what the most memorable moment was for her recording lines as Yuffie. She goes on to say, it was when Yuffie got motion sick, and there are not too few of those scenes. I just remember when we were playing it out, my director, Kirk Thornton, was like, okay, I need you to really act like you're vomiting right now. I need you to actually hurl chunks. So I was trying to give my grossest reaction, and it was great and really fun. I'm sorry to all of these sympathetic vomiters out there. But then the team were like, actually, you need to tone it down. They don't really like that. In the original take, it was quite a lot. Hopefully it's scaled back a little in the actual game. Those are some of the funniest moments for poor Yuffie, because she has this very confident moment where she's ready to move on with the mission, and then they have to get into a vehicle or go on one of my favorite moments is when she, Barrett, and Tifa are in this mine cart and they're going on this roller coaster of a ride. And you as a player can determine, do you want that ride to be gentle and easy or super wacky and crazy? Both result in some pretty great moments where Yuffie is just so motion sick, which, know, something they introduced back in Intermission, but she just cannot handle that stuff, and she's constantly either vomiting or on the edge of vomiting, and it's just some of the funniest stuff that Yuffie gets to do. What was her favorite scene to play in Rebirth? She responds by saying, "Oh man, so much happens in Rebirth. I distinctly remember an interaction where she starts singing. I had to memorize the tune and they had actual lyrics written out. I think it took the entire session because I am not a singer and they had to really try hard to get it right." So that's actually kind of shocking to me because there's a few moments in the game where you hear Yuffie singing just out of pure boredom. And she sounds really good. Suzie has a really nice voice. She sings in tune. She's singing along to the theme of her song that we hear in Intermission. I forget the name of it. I think it's Descendant of a Shinobi. And that's the tune that she's singing about in regards to her either being bored or hunting down materia and how she's going to get her hands on it. It's these really cute moments that you see with Yuffie where, again, she's a kid. She's got that one-track mind at times, and she can be so easily bored, and she just wants to find something to do to stay entertained. And the thing that we'll end on is Suzie's favorite thing about Yuffie. She goes on to say, "That's so hard because I love everything about her. She's so precious and I just want to protect her at all times. I just love that she's a big kid who's excited for adventures. She's super sarcastic and witty and bratty, which I love, especially when she interacts with more serious characters. She just brings the life to a lot of situations she's in, but surprisingly, she can be mature when the situation calls for it." And Suzie just hits the nail on the head with that character description. She's ready for whatever gets thrown her way, and her interaction with the more serious characters in the game, especially Barrett, are just so good, man.
"You on the lamp, big guy?"
The hell I am!
And again, they do such a great line of towing the line between, okay, Yuffie, you're annoying the crap out of me right now, but also I completely understand you and want to just keep you safe. And also just a quick thing here, one of my favorite moments for Yuffie in the game, it's in Gungaga when they're visiting the reactor and Scarlet shows up, her nemesis. And at this point in the story, Cloud is messed up. He's in no shape to fight, so Barrett and Red get him out of there, and it's the girls' time to shine. Tifa, Aerith, and Yuffie take on Scarlet, and they whoop her ass in this really awesome boss fight where all these characters are working together for a greater good, and it's just such a satisfying section in that game, especially for Yuffie, because again, that's a moment where she can flip that switch and go from, you know, young teenager to, this is the woman that hurt me, she wronged me, she took so much away from me, now I'm gonna make her pay. And Suzie, you're nailing it, much like everyone in this cast. Her voice just so quintessentially to me sounds like Yuffie, and I literally cannot imagine anyone else now voicing the character. Like, when I think of Yuffie, I'm gonna hear Suzie's voice, and it's just quintessential Yuffie. So with that being said, that's the video. Let me know in the comments down below, what do you guys think so far of Suzie Yeung's portrayal of Yuffie, and is there a specific Yuffie moment that you're looking forward to in part 3? I am Curious Corduroy. I will see you guys in the next video. Please remember to always be excellent to one another.